All right. Well, thank you everyone for showing up this week. We have Patrick Kalie, and he's going to be talking about events and ROI and finding expansion opportunities at events. And we're just going to have a great discussion on events today. I'm sure more people will filter in as they open their emails. But welcome, Patrick. Thank you for joining us, and we're excited to hear what you have to share.
Thank you. Thank you. Can y'all see my screen now? It's just like events and customer marketing.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Perfect. Perfect. Cool. So I'm excited to talk about events. We were talking about this a couple weeks ago. I brought up like, hey, like quick self-serving question, like how do y'all work with your events teams? And I've been taking like an events-based approach to customer marketing for the past like 5 or so years. And it's like really worked out for me. And to the point where I ended up getting a job at an events company, which is very cool. Yeah, I mean, if anybody in the chat, if you want to throw in like what kind of events you've run, or like what your involvement is with user conferences, I'd love to know what y'all are thinking. Um, I guess I can go ahead and like do a little bit more introduction. Right after college, I went to work at a speakers bureau. So I helped book professional speakers with to get their speaking engagements. That was very fun, very rewarding career. Got to meet some really cool people. And then after that, I ended up transitioning into tech as a customer success manager. The person who was running our user conference quit about 2 months before the conference. And they were like, oh, hey, Patrick, you used to work in events. Can you do it? I was like, yeah, sure, cool. So hopped in, ran that user conference. And ever since then, like that was part of my push into customer marketing, is managing these events. So started leading, took a job as a customer marketer at Quorum at that time. Started leading weekly webinars during the pandemic to keep our accounts engaged, to keep people learning about the product. Did roundtables there as well. And then we ended up doing a week-long digital conference that had about 2,000 attendees, which was pretty neat. Went to work at Maven Clinic, where we launched a few different webinars to launch new products. Wasn't there for very long before I moved over to Swoogo. I interviewed there talking about how, I do customer marketing, but talked about like my experience with events. And so I got so excited about it that ended up, now I do events all the time. So the events that I'm running now, first off, doing a lot of digital events with like industry leaders. So thinking about this more as like a top funnel thing, that's both customer marketing and prospect marketing. I run our annual user conference, frequent how-to webinars, which are like more in-depth on the product. We do micro events, think like dinners, happy hours, things like that. And then also I'm throwing in here customer story webinars that are like kind of walking through how people have used the product with their like total strategy, really thinking like more strategy focused stuff. Yeah, cool. Seeing a lot of folks in the chat saying planning smallish customer roundtables, in-person events. I notice a lot of customer marketers are really involved with the content planning and finding speakers. That's a slog, and like congrats for doing that. That's like the biggest help I've heard from event people, is like the finding the right people to speak and getting those compelling stories. Super cool, super cool. So when I think about events, think about it through the journey. Events are like super helpful for, the entire journey, but not all events fit each piece. And so I put together this little graph that like shows where I see events having the biggest impact. I run primarily owned events, so the things that are listed here. Trade shows are another thing that are really helpful. I don't do quite as much of that, so I want to focus in a little bit more about the stuff that I do here. So what I've seen a lot is that these big digital events in industry leaders, stuff like that, is really helpful for top of funnel and driving new business. But we've seen a stupid amount of success in getting adoption here. And I think a lot of this goes back to the idea of like social proof. of like, okay, cool. Like right after you sign your contract, you get that little bit of FOMO. And having like being the thing that like, or not FOMO, like you'll vote like buyer's remorse. Once you get like that buyer's remorse, having some kind of industry leader come on and talk about your product and talk about, or like the industry and that you're the one who brought them on there, that really like spurs, I found it really spurs adoption and getting people to like really bought in to what you and your company do. It's also like the time when people go dark. So as a CSM, I can tell you how many times like we signed an account and then like it's 30 days later and they haven't talked to me. But saying like, hey, there's this, digital event with an industry leader. By the way, pass over any questions. Do you have any questions for them? I'll be sure to make sure that gets answered on the webinar. Stuff like that has been like super helpful in getting people engaged. These in-person micro events, found that they're not super helpful for top of funnel, usually really helpful for when they're pretty warm. And so getting that consideration and purchase folks there. And then super helpful for retention and advocacy of getting, if you're doing these micro events, like make sure you at least have like 5 customers in the room who are able to like speak your good graces. How-to webinars are really helpful for adoption and retention. I'm going to talk about the purchase piece here in a little bit. And then user conferences are helpful throughout the entire journey. Customer story webinars are super helpful throughout the entire journey. And I think really, really helpful under adoption and retention stages. It's a really good question, Cassie. Where do you decide where to host these? So there's a few things we've done here. One is we've utilized LinkedIn data. So seeing like where people follow you from, like what areas are really helpful there. And then really utilizing your, like if you have like named accounts lists, of going through and finding like, I spent like 4 hours finding our like contacts at our named account lists and then finding where they live on LinkedIn and then like categorizing that data. That's been really helpful for me to find those specific spots. The other one is we're doing our user conference in Austin this year. And so one approach we're taking is that's in November. We know that for enterprise deals, we have a pretty long sales cycle, and that if we were to back that, it would turn into May, that when we would want to get started with that. So now we're using these micro events in order to like really kick off the consideration phase for a lot of folks. So that by the time they get to the user conference, it'll be like they are just about to sign or they just signed, and it'll be a really, really impactful moment for them. Cool. So that's about that with the journey. We talked a little bit about driving adoption and upsell. I had mentioned before that I find like, I think this is the coolest spot in events. This, or for how-to webinars, is the purchase stage. We started running these events that are how-to webinars, like how do you do XYZ in the product? And initially we were keeping those exclusive to customers, right? Because you want to be able to like do the thing that you're talking about on the webinar, but found that they're stupidly helpful for people in the purchase phase, because it's kind of like pulling the toy car back. Like you're ramping, getting all that energy ready. So like when folks do sign, they're like, they know the product pretty well already. They have an idea of specifically what they want to do. They've seen examples and they're like ready and gearing up to adopt right away. It gives a really great sneak peek into the product. It shows live examples. And also this kind of gives like the AE the permission to be like bad and break the rules. So one of the like things that we do is we track to see what kind of messages are driving the most registrations, using like UTM parameters and all that kind of fun stuff. And one of the messages that works really well for AEs is I shouldn't be sending this to you, but blank. That works so well because it's like, hey, this is usually for customers, but you're practically a customer already. Wanted to send this to you to make sure that like when you time to get started, you feel really comfortable in the product. That like works super well of getting like, so get your really late stage prospects and opportunities into some of these how-to webinars. I found that works super well to close. Here's an example of like what one of those webinars looks like. This is one of our customer hosted ones where we have 2 customers these two were from Rakuten, and they were kind of walking through what they did in the product. Pretty cool stuff. One of the things that we were thinking about for driving adoption upsells is for these how-to webinars and most of the content that we do to take it just one step further than your fundamentals and basics. We're using this to highlight parts of our product that might not usually get love. So to try to get that second order of adoption in. So when people come and join you and accomplish their primary objective in your platform, we're trying to think of like, okay, what's that next step? Or like, what's something else that people would want to adopt? So think about this as like using a new reason to love your product or introducing that new reason. For driving upsells, the number one tip we had here, or I had here, was to be super clear about the products and SKUs the content is related to make sure that that intent signal is like a very clear intent signal. So for example, at a previous company, we had 7 different products. I would run how-to webinars at first that were product agnostic. So they would kind of run the gambit of a bunch of different products. The idea there was to kind of get awareness on what our other products were doing. And we found that didn't drive like much of anything at all. As a matter of fact, even like the opportunities influenced was super low. And so instead, what we decided to do was we decided to make each of the webinars very product specific and called that out. That said like, hey, this only works with our grassroots product. Don't attend unless you're interested in the grassroots product, right? And we ended up finding we got a ton of super hot, like very like informed intent leads from people who were excited to cross-sell into that other product. So that was like such a great way for us to identify those folks. And lastly, engage in the chat. Are you all familiar with the term multi-threading, where the idea is that like at an account, you have the salesperson, the account executive, but there's all these other people that you need to get involved, right? I find as a customer marketer, like I get to be one of like the more fun people to involve with, like I'm hosting events, I'm sending the emails, putting the jokes in the newsletter, stuff like that. And so being able to like develop strong relationships with users through these different events. So for all of our different webinars, all of our different micro events, I usually spend about 2 hours afterwards to look through who attended, like send thank yous for coming, looking through the chat, all that kind of fun stuff, to start like really developing a relationship with those individuals. That's been really helpful because sometimes they're more willing to come to me with questions and like upsell thoughts, like, hey, what's the deal with XYZ product? Than they would be to like an account manager or, maybe an account executive. So that's one of the best ways that we found that. Realize I've been talking pretty quick. Does anybody have any questions about any of the things covered so far? No? No? All right, cool. I'll keep on going.
You're doing great. This is really good. I'm enjoying the slides and the pulling the toy car back and just the different things you're talking about. But it makes sense. I really like the idea of the A's being able to share more and break a few of the rules and show more of the product or more of the things that they're not usually able to. Oh, Julie just asked a question. How do you
Yeah.
manage not overstepping in AMS when you engage afterward? Has that ever been an issue?
Oh, sorry, I meant account managers.
Yeah.
PMs.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's really fair. When sometimes account managers are super precious and like want to puppy guard their clients. I totally get that, especially if if their primary like metric that they go off of is retention, like they get really anxious whenever somebody else is like touching their accounts here. I think this is usually where it's really helpful. Like I CC the account manager and everything we reach out to. And then also like at the end, try to like hype up their AM. So it was like, hey, for example, sent one yesterday after a webinar that was, hey, thank you so much for joining. I loved when you said XYZ in the chat. Also, if you haven't had the chance to chat with insert account manager, they're like amazing to talk to about this. And then I gave like a quick story about something that their account manager did that was really helpful for another client. So like, I think you're usually pretty cool if you're able to hype them up. in the chat there as well, and keep them strung along throughout the whole, conversation. Cool. All right. Speaking of AMs, this was like my biggest, I think, like unlock in the past 6 months, is figuring out that account managers and CSMs are like your top promotional channel. So this is a count of registration source using UTM parameters to see like who or where people came through registration for one of our latest webinars. You'll see our biggest source here was post salesperson. So we're counting this as account managers and CSMs. Before, when we had just started doing webinars, I sent like a message in Slack and was like, hey, we're doing this webinar. Here's a link, you can send them if you want to. And we had, maybe like 120 people on, and the marketing email was doing the heavy lift for getting people registered. Since then, we started really investing a lot of energy into sales enablement. So things we did there, first we made it a competition. So the top salesperson or pre-salesperson, the top post-salesperson to drive the most registrants got like a $25 gift card. $25 gift card's like not a whole lot, like it's not really exciting, but the fact that you win something is cool. So we found like people got really excited about that. We posted like a leaderboard and stuff like that on upcoming calls. People got really into it. Based off the content, I pulled lists of target accounts and contacts. So for example, we did one that was a pretty basic one on like a core function of our product, and said, okay, here are all the accounts that have red usage. These would be good people to reach out to. So we pulled that list. People were just our AMs then were able to use the copy that I wrote and social language and all that kind of stuff, just to like copy and paste and send out all of these different messages. And then we use UTM parameters to like, of course, to track to see who's getting the most registrants. But then after our first webinar, we saw one person got 30 registrants within 2 days and reached out and was like, hey, what did you do? What was the message that you used? And so we were able to take that specific message and replicate it across everyone else. And everybody started getting a ton of different registrants that they weren't able to activate before. So getting account managers and CSMs involved from the beginning and getting them excited to drive registrations to your webinars has been super, super helpful for me. The other thing we did is we started diversifying promotions. So again, like I said, we did a lot of email, but we started putting it on the website banner at the top of our website. That drove us a good bit of clicks. The login page was super helpful. So when people were logging in, they saw another pop-up for the webinar. They were able to quickly register there. And then we did a little bit on LinkedIn. I find that so many teams just post on LinkedIn or have an email that's like, have their registration thing like buried at the end of a newsletter. And they're like, why aren't I getting registrations? And it's like, well, because, you're really not utilizing these other channels really, really well. So this has been like one of the big unlocks, is the need to activate these people and get them excited. Cool. So next, I wanted to talk a little bit about social proof for events. I think it's really easy at in-person events to get stories and testimonials, and you just kind of have to do it at the event. So last year when I started at Swoogo, we didn't have like any real, we had a few case studies. We were primarily pulling quotes from G2. And so we really used our event to like really kickstart our social proof. So we were able to get like 9 video interviews. We were able to get a bunch of different pieces of content just through this event. Some of the things that we did here, one is at the event, we just asked people like, hey, do you want to go to the back room to record a quick testimonial? And 9 out of 10 people said yes. They were just like, yeah, sure, we'd love to do that. We just had a camera set up, and we're able to get some pretty high quality videos of some of these customers. Like, when is there like a better chance that you have like all of your like key contacts in one spot that you can get these, rather than having to like chase them around the country to get them? So, and once one person said, yes, I want to do it, then suddenly everybody else was like, oh, hell yeah, no, I'll do a video. People were like tapping me on the shoulder and like, hey, Patrick, I would love to do a video. Can you go take me in the back to record? So that was really cool. there's something also really dynamic about doing a show floor interview. So like I mentioned, we don't do a whole lot of trade show, or I don't do a whole lot of trade show stuff. That's another part of our team. But something that's been like super helpful is just like if a customer comes up to your booth and they're like, oh my God, I love your product. I do blah, 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 blah. Being like, okay, cool. Hold that thought. Do you mind doing a quick video for us? And it's just like super dynamic and engaging. The videos are so fun because like people are walking around, you know, you spend all this money on your booth, so you have this really cool backdrop behind you. It's just a really cool way to get those stories. You do have to do a little bit of coaching though. I find whenever you ask someone impromptu to do a story or like, hey, can you do a quick testimonial? They all say like the exact same thing. They're like, oh yeah, I love the product. It saves me time and the support team is great. But you kind of have to like dig in a little bit and do a little bit more work there to like get the specific stories about what they're accomplishing as well to kind of get like diversity of stories there. The other thing is there was a Forrester report that came out recently that said that only 70% of companies are reusing event content. What? So if you're hosting these different sessions at your event that include customers, like be sure to reuse that content. So we post the recordings, we cut into bytes. Oh, it's 70%. Did I say 10? 70% are using content afterwards. But yeah, we cut it into bytes that are perfect for sales outreach. And then we also use that to turn into blogs, testimonials. So now if you go to our customer story site, it's all just stuff from our latest event, which I think is really cool. If you're spending all this money to get these people to your event, especially some of your like key account contacts, like make sure that you're using that content really well. So yeah, I mean, you can spend how many thousands of dollars on a case study for some of these folks. If you already have them at your event, let's use it.
I was just gonna say, Patrick, on that, I'm glad it was 70%. I thought you said 10%. But I've noticed that when I share something after an event, like even with these weekly calls that I do, I get up to 2 times more people that will actually watch it or engage with it than the number of people who showed up or even the number of people that registered. So reusing content afterwards makes a huge difference.
Totally, totally. It's also a muscle. I found that like when we first started, or it's like a behavior that has to be learned by your audience over time. When we first started doing it, we got like maybe like 3 or 4 views on a video after a webinar. But if you keep like following up and you keep like sending the recording afterwards, you keep posting on social afterwards, like people get into the habit of like either, okay, I didn't show up for that webinar, but I really want to make sure I go watch it. Stuff like that is, you
Yeah,
know, on
it's
that like
like
the more you do it, the better you
it's
get.
training them with social norms of what their community is.
Yeah, totally, totally. Um, for sure. Yeah, totally agree, Gene. The personalization and timing does make a lot of difference there. Um, the we so we do about 7 webinars per month, or not per month, per quarter. If you were to get hit up with 7 webinar messages in a quarter, like after a while, you get pretty annoyed. So we do a lot of different like personalization there and segmentation to make sure that people are getting the right webinars like and at the right time. Um, totally. Yeah. Oh yeah. Pulling the sound bites from the webinars. That's super helpful. So okay, let me like story time rant. We first started doing webinars at a previous company. We the process was I would do the webinar, then send it over to our content people and was like, hey, go find nuggets here to do or to like to pull and stuff like that. And they either like wouldn't do it. This was a previous company, and or they would pull ones that are like so generic and kind of dumb that like I wasn't like super into. So what I started doing was planning, trying to find like, okay, what is that golden nugget? And just get that down to like a 30-second soundbite, and even telling my speakers like, hey, I think this is our golden nugget. Like, let's work on pitching this. Let's make sure like our slide looks really good, all that kind of stuff. So like rather than like snipping after the session, we snipped before, and that made like getting the piece right afterwards super, super helpful. Yeah, for sure. Gotta ask the right questions. Also gotta find the right questions, but sometimes you know exactly what you want to hear from your guest. And you kind of have to like back in the right question there. I find like it's really helpful just to tell, your guest, be like, hey, this is specifically what I want to hear. And usually they're like, no, yeah, that's totally right. That's exactly what I want to say. And sometimes they'll say like, like, okay, yeah, let's refine it a little bit for sure. Cool, cool, cool. All right. I also found we had a 2x higher likelihood of people saying, yes, I'll speak on a webinar, or at an event than, hey, will you participate in a case study with us? There's something about the term case study that I think just like rubs people the wrong way. Also, it's like, it sounds more like it's like for us versus like, hey, can I highlight you as a person, like as a thought leader? Like that works way better. And then when the session's over, just turn it into a case study, like, or turn it into a blog post or a piece of social proof. That works way, way better. Also, now you have video, which performs really well versus case studies. Yes, Cassie, case study I find doesn't really work unless it's like super specific, like it is like exactly what a case study would be for an audience of that's like, oh, like scientific approach. Like when I was at Maven Clinic, which was a telehealth clinic, we did use case study a lot because it was like a health thing, and because it was like a true like scientific case study. But since then, we started moving over to term like customer stories, or because we do events, we call them like behind the scenes or behind the event, stuff like that. Works really well. And we find it also gets like higher clicks from emails and stuff like that versus saying read the case study, saying read the behind the scenes. People are really into that. Finding potential speakers. This used to give me like aneurysms of trying to find people to speak at events. And this is like one hack that just has really made my life easier, is when you host webinars, like look to the comments to see who wants to be heard. I found like how many people are like attending webinars
Oh, ma'am. Here.
because they want to like put their voice out there. So like going into the chat to see like, okay, who are these people? These are people that I like in the 2 hours after the webinar, I make sure I reach out to, find them on LinkedIn, thank them for coming. And then if they have like a title or if they're posting about things that is something that we want to elevate or something that we like fits one of our upcoming campaigns that we're running, I'll immediately reach out and be like, hey, are you interested in doing a webinar yourself? That kind of stuff works really, really well for me. These people are literally telling you that they want to be heard. So let's use it. Cool, cool, cool. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions or thoughts like that on social proof? Yeah, totally, Christine. Finding people with CSMs that have compelling stories is super helpful. They're like one of the best, the sources there. When I first started, I did like a big competition. I called it Call for Sneakers, and we were like saying, if you're an account manager or a CSM, like nominate your customers to be a speaker on our future webinars and stuff. And the person who nominates the most that we deem like successful nomination wins a pair of like custom Air Force Ones. So it was our Call for Sneakers campaign. We ended up getting like 100 different nominations in there, and we're still using that list to reach out to people to speak or to do case studies and stuff like that. That was really, really helpful.
We did that too, and it worked amazingly well.
Yeah, it's insane. It's also like one of those, I bet you your CSMs or AMs have an idea of who to like, or like in the back of their mind, like there's something there. But when you ask them like, hey, who would be good to speak on X topic, like suddenly their mind goes blank. So doing like a general one that's like, who would be good at talking about XYZ? And then we did like a drop down of like, what are the topics you think they'd be good at talking about? And that was really helpful for us to like say, okay, they'd be really good at using data and analytics, stuff like that. was really helpful.
I did questions to the CSMs during our one-on-ones where I would say,
Yeah.
which of your people has the best compelling story this time? And
Yeah.
then when it came time to look for speakers, I would come back to them and say, how's this story going along? Can we get them to talk about their journey at the conference?
Yeah, totally. And doing it with, I found with doing with AEs as well, saying like, of the deals that you booked in the past 6 months, how many of them fit our core value prop to a T? Like that will have that switching story. That would be great to elevate. And then we follow them through the journey and reach out afterwards. Cool. Dean, I see a question. Do you consider title when assessing speakers, or is it more personality and ability to communicate to the audience? Yes, we use title a good bit when it indicates something. So like, for example, we're doing one on field marketing, a webinar on field marketing. So of course, we're going to look through titles that say field marketing to find those folks there. And also if we're doing something that we want something more tactical, like what are the specific things that you do? That's when we usually tap more like senior manager, director, manager levels versus we want something a little bit more strategic. Then we really do look for like VP, stuff like that. Other things we look for is experience at different places. So like if they have worked at 4 or 5 different companies, that's like a really good sign for me because they're able to talk to it in less of like a narrow focus of like what specifically they're doing. Yeah, that's funny. The higher the title, the less they know. Yeah, that's fair. There's something there that like sometimes okay, so at our conference, we had a bunch of different speakers that were ranging from senior manager to VP. I wanted to get super tactical in the things that we had mentioned because there's like 1,000 events that are about events that just talk about how important events are, which is kind of what I was doing today, but like less so. But so I wanted to get super tactical, and like the senior managers were incredible for that. The directors were incredible for that. And then we had a VP come up and they were super like high level, like not even like real strategy stuff, just kind of like repeating the same things you hear on LinkedIn a bit. So I do find that, yeah, having like different titles there is super, super helpful, not just to go for whoever's like the highest title at a specific org. Other things we look for follower count on LinkedIn because we want them to share on social. And if they have a higher follower count, means it'll likely get more reach on social. Also likely means that they use social a good bit, or they use LinkedIn a good bit to help like craft their message and like bring things to, you know, the market. And that's super, super helpful there. Yeah, that's a good point, Gene, about like checking out their LinkedIn posts to see if they have like a sharing interest. That's a really, really good point. Kind of goes like the same thing, like that if you can, if they're posting on social, posting on LinkedIn, they're really likely to want to join your webinar and have some really interesting things to say. I check to see if they're following other people that I know that are like industry influencers. So I can name like 5 or 6 events industry influencers that I'm connected with on LinkedIn. And if I see that they're also connected with those people, then I know that they're like tapped in and trying to think like strategically. That's super helpful as well. Yeah, there's like a lot that goes into finding really cool speakers. And LinkedIn honestly is probably my biggest help there. Yeah, okay. So ROI. Wanted to talk about this pretty quick and talk about the metrics that we use. But for the love of goodness, integrate with your CRM. Like whatever your event tech is, like ask to make sure that you can get it integrated with whatever CRM you're using, especially if you can get Salesforce. This is my #1 regret from previous jobs, is that we would just do the host a thing, pull the list, upload it into Salesforce. Like once we started getting it integrated into Salesforce, then suddenly like that unlocked all these different like cool pieces of data we could get. The other thing we found is that suddenly we started getting a whole lot more primary attribution for events. And I think it's because it was last touch attribution, where if something is, it takes time to upload that, into Salesforce, or something happens between the time they registered and the time like the event happens, there's probably multiple other touch points in there. So like those, are the ones that would end up getting attribution. So yeah, ignore attribution. I wish we could. I wish we could ignore attribution. I wish everybody would ignore attribution. But it means something to a lot of folks. So yeah, ignore attribution at your own peril. So yeah, for the love of goodness, ask your account or ask your events people if they're integrated into their CRM. That's not like a Swoogo thing. All event tech has it. So just make sure you're doing that. Here are the different metrics that we've been using for events. Nicola Kastner is a great follow on LinkedIn who talks a lot about event ROI and the metrics you should be following. But these are the ones that I've been trying to use a good bit. I break them into 3 different categories. One is success metrics, which is like, what was the impact on the business? 2 were diagnostic metrics, which means like, how good am I at events? Like, was this a good event? Is my event muscle strong, right? And 3 is content goals, which is thinking about, okay, what specifically can I get out of this event content wise? So to set that from the beginning here. So yeah, I'm not going to read through all these different ones, but I do want to highlight that red accounts is like my personal favorite for events, like of the number of like at-risk accounts that attend your events. I once got in an argument at a previous gig because I was coming in and saying like, look at all these people that participate in my community. Look at all these people that are coming to my events and stuff like that. And look at all this, like they have way higher NPS scores than before. Like that's probably because my community and my events. And our head of product was like, okay, yeah, but you're just getting the people who are happy. Like you're not activating people who are like at risk. Like you're just like fluff, like putting fluff on top of an already good situation. And so ever since then, I really started tracking this, which was red accounts in attendance to make sure that, okay, yeah, we are actually getting people who are at risk and making some impact on like the bottom line here. Yeah, product people. I mean, they made it, so they get some kind of credit, I guess. What name did I mention for following about events? Nicola Kastner, Nicolakastner. She is fantastic. Definitely recommend that. But I do recommend breaking up your goals in these different ways. When you talk to a lot of events people, they'll focus a lot on 2, which is like number of registrants, number of attendees, event NPS, because their job is to mostly like execute a great event. But I think as marketers, we really have to step in with 1 and 3 to say, okay, yeah, but these are the things that I specifically want to track for our user conference because it, has the biggest impact on the bottom line there. So these are the big KPIs that we track as well. All right, realize I didn't edit my closing slide. But yeah, that's what I had so far to share. I'm curious if anybody has like any questions or any thoughts about events that they'd like to share.
You had mentioned the like looking for upsells at events. Did you cover that? You covered so much. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, the big things there to find upsells is to be clear about intent in sessions. So for example, for these how-to webinars, one of the biggest things there was you want to be able to say, we did a session on this product. The person that does not have this product came to that session, indicated interest there. Like, let's reach out to them because that's very clear and it's a very clear intent signal that they'd be good to upgrade. So in addition, especially for how-to webinars, in addition to like, creating more adoption and retention through people who already have that product, like it's a great opportunity to get some upsell opportunities there as well. It's the same thing with a user conference. So if you're at a user conference, it's great to track session attendance because if people are attending sessions for things that they don't have or topics that are like another product that they don't yet have, That's a really great intent signal that they would be good to move over to that other product. The other thing I heard recently that I thought was really, really smart was they adopted the phrase "never event alone," so which meant that they gave heavy discounts for group registration, and then gave free tickets if they weren't already a user. So I think there's something about going to an event and like you're writing down the notes of all the different things that you're learning, which is really cool. But it's even better if you have a team member right beside you and you're able to like riff off the ideas you just heard. And it's even better for you if that other person is not already a user, because then they'll be like really excited about becoming a user, maybe bringing on a new team, all that kind of fun stuff was really helpful for expansion. You can steal that phrase, "never event alone." It performs really well in subject lines and email headers.
I love that. I can already tell this is going to be one of my favorite calls that we've done in 2024. Because yes, you're talking about events, but you're also talking about a lot of just like tips and things about going through and like really tactical, like how to apply these things. And it's been really helpful. Yes, Alexi says completely agree, so much value.
Awesome.
But yes, Alexi, you put a lot in the comments as well. So thank you for sharing that. And anybody who wants to save the comments, there should be like 3 dots that you can see. And if you click on the 3 dots and hit save chat, it should save the chat for you, unless Zoom has changed something. But yeah, Patrick, I'd love to hear if you have any ideas or even a few tips for looking back at event data. Anything off the top of your head that jumps out at you on that?
Yeah, so events are really cool to see what is getting traction. We started really utilizing registration to get that data on like what are people really interested in. For example, we just launched our save the date for our annual conference. And in that we said like, hey, what kind of sessions are you interested in hearing more about? What are the products that you're interested in hearing more about? That's been really helpful to like get the data on what other content we should be doing, but also that really helps with like the rest of the content that I produce through the rest of the year of like, here are the case studies that people want to hear more about, all that kind of fun stuff. Looking at session attendance data is really helpful to figure out what is getting traction. Like what are people really interested in hearing there? The other thing is there's a lot of platforms out there that do brain dates really well and networking really well.
Indeed.
So so like seeing what meetings happened at your event, I think is really, really helpful to identify some cross-sell opportunities or some upsell opportunities. Because it's like, okay, I know they met with this person who did this like specific thing and brought it on to that product. I bet there's an upsell opportunity there that like they could also do the same thing. Or like, I wonder why they met with that person. Like let's see what let's dig in there a little bit
Do you
further.
mean, so explain that to me, what that looks like, because I'm a little bit lost on what a brain date is and who's looking at this event information. Like, are customers or prospects meeting with your like AEs and then you're taking that information and looking at it?
Hmm. So it's more peer-to-peer. That's one of the biggest trends we've been seeing in events lately is that it used to be people came to events for content. Content was king. Right now, it seems like the reason why people come to events is a lot to do with networking, meeting new people, the different experiential parts. That seems to be what's really getting traction with different copy. One of the big ways that folks do that is through a concept called brain dates, which are sometimes like AI matched like speed networking essentially. So you'll like upload your profile as part of registration. Through that, you can then like either reach out to other people who are attending to the event, or AI can match you to say, these are like the people you should be talking to. And so like for one example was Rakuten. as part of registration, they said, what are the things that you would like to talk about? And then through that, they created this big roster of everybody who is attending the event. And ahead of time, they encouraged all of their folks or all their attendees to go schedule meetings with them. Or they had like members of the pro services team connect people for them, right? So finding out like, okay, who met with whom or who scheduled calls with whom was really interesting data to see like, okay, who is interested in what other things. Also just having that data as part of registration was really cool to see.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Alexi had a question. Do you have a holistic CMA database, or are you working with a collection of different platforms integrated into your CRM?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a CMA database.
I knew
Or
it.
like, we don't have like, yeah. Sorry, that's why I also didn't take your survey. By the way, sort of recommend taking the survey. It's
Oh,
great.
no,
There's some
no,
like,
that's
I can't
fine.
wait for that. But I'm really excited to see like why there was something that was like, oh, I didn't realize that was going to be so low, or that was going to be so high. So
Well,
can't wait to
even
see
if you just use
resolve
a
that. But,
spreadsheet, just using a spreadsheet, you can take the survey. And
okay.
I specifically want to talk to more people that just use spreadsheets, because I want to see if we can put together a really awesome spreadsheet, like as a community, to
Oh, interesting.
help us work on these things until we can make the business case to get a platform.
Yeah, so we use existing tools like Salesforce to track how people are engaging with what. We use our own platform, Swoogo, to host the events and all that kind of fun stuff. And that helps us gather a lot of the data that we can then put in HubSpot. I don't want to be like to pitch Swoogo or anything, but we did have one customer that used the webinar experience and registration to have a question in there. It's like, would you be willing to serve as a reference, or would you be willing to serve as to do a case study? And they used it that way as part of getting, or as part of like to register for a webinar that was able to like get a bunch of different people to sign on and do case studies afterwards. So it was like a really great opportunity for them to identify some folks. But no, we don't use like Influitive or Base or Dito or any of those platforms.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing all of that. It's really great. Did anybody else have any other questions they wanted to ask? You can just jump in or leave a comment. Patrick, I did notice on that very awesome slide you had with the types of events and how they help at different stages of the customer journey. Roundtables in the last probably 3 years or so, roundtables for customers have been super, super helpful for advocacy. And I wasn't sure really what event that would fall under. It's not really user conference, so it'd probably be its own little addition at the bottom, but it's been really helpful. It's kind of like having live community where people jump on and just talk about things. And like you showed with that social, the commenting, like you see people in there commenting, and it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Hey, would you like to share more? Let's hear more about your experience and your expertise. And it's really helpful. So I'm sure there were a lot of screenshots on this one, because this is a very awesome slide deck. And yeah, does anybody else have any questions? Also, Jean, thank you. Is it Jean or? Yeah, Jean Hodges, thank you for sharing in the comments and just sharing your information and your ideas and stuff. This has been a really, really great call, and I'm going to see a lot of people sharing it and sending it around. So this has been very fun.
Yeah, it's been an awesome one. And for you to tackle sales, I always have that great admiration.
Yeah.
So That was just excellent. So thanks for sharing your tips with that.
For sure. I love your point here is that you can get buy-in from account managers by having them
Yeah.
identify their trouble spots. That I found, at least as a CSM, when I was CSM, it was like, I have 10 accounts that are just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know. I don't know what to do anymore. Like I tried everything. So oh, cool. The customer marketer wants to get involved. Like, yeah, sure. Like, of course, we'll let the customer marketer get involved, and help out with that. The other one there was like, if you're a salesperson who is not hitting your numbers, like you need any piece of data to prove that you're doing your job well and that you're like getting folks actively engaged. And I think like that saying like, I got 20 people on our latest webinar is like a really cool data piece that you can use to say like, cool, I'm really doing what I'm doing, even if like I'm not quite hitting quota yet. So like giving like that as like a tool for their arsenal to like prove their worth has been really helpful for salespeople.
That might be really, really helpful in asking like the heads of sales, like who are your salespeople that need some additional support to hit their numbers and be able to, because sometimes we have a hard time getting sales to participate with us and,
Yeah.
telling us what they need and things like that. That might be one way to get that information and, help those salespeople be more successful and show that across the board.
Totally. Yeah, a great place to start there is by giving UTM parameters for salespeople for registration links. So you can track to say this person is bringing in these people. Like the second that we started tracking it that way, suddenly people were getting really excited about inviting their customers, inviting their prospects, and that because they knew it was being tracked. So like once you do that, then suddenly like people get really excited. And there's like some easy ways that you can create UTM parameters, and it ends up getting picked up in just about every marketing automation platform you use.
Wow. Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you for coming and sharing. And thank you everyone who jumped on this week to listen and share your thoughts and opinions. Thank you, Lexi. And yeah, we will be back next week and we can talk about whatever's going on next week. I don't know yet. But thank you all for coming and have a really great weekend. And Patrick, this was just amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.